Some places aren't forgotten by accident. They're buried on purpose. I used to think silence was peaceful, a kind of stillness that meant safety. But in that forest, the silence was alive. It listened. It waited. I only went to take pictures. I thought it would be just another story for my blog. Untouched woods, eerie trees, a little local legend to spice it up. But Elder Hollow wasn't just a place. It was a memory. And now, I think, it remembers me. The Discovery. My name is Mason Lawson. I run a moderately successful blog called Hidden Horizons, where I document my explorations of overlooked natural wonders, places without gift shops or guided tours, places where the quiet feels earned. I have a decent following, enough to justify the occasional sponsored hiking gear and to explain away my perpetual wanderlust to disapproving relatives. It's my job, I tell them, though we both know it's more than that. It's an addiction to discovery, to being first, to capturing beauty others have missed. 3 weeks ago, I was researching locations for my upcoming fall series. The working title was America's Forgotten Corners, focusing on places that had somehow slipped through the cracks of tourism and social media saturation. I'd spent hours combing through the obscure forums, local history archives, and mapping inconsistencies. That's when I found the first mention of Elder Hollow. It wasn't much, just a comment on a hiking forum from 6 years ago. Someone asking if anyone had ever explored, quote, that unmapped forest outside of Ravenwood, the one locals call Elder Hollow. No replies. The account has since been deleted. I searched deeper, found a reference in a century-old journal from a local historical society. The dense woodland region commonly avoided, known to settlers as Elder Hollow, or Echoing Woods in the earlier accounts, remains largely unexplored due to superstitious concerns among the townspeople. The geographical anomaly intrigued me more than the folklore. How could a sizable forest in the northeastern United States remain virtually unmapped in the digital age? Google Maps showed only an indistinct green patch with no trails or markers. Land ownership records were vague, listing it simply as non-designated woodland, heritage status pending. My interest became obsession when I drove to Ravenwood, a town of barely 3,000 people nestled in the hills. The locals were friendly but evasive. When I asked about hiking trails, they directed me to state parks 30 miles away. When I specifically mentioned Elder Hollow, conversations died abruptly. Finally, at a gas station on the outskirts of town, I met Harold, an attendant in his 70s with gnarled hands and eyes that had seen more than they wanted to. "Why would a young fella like you want to go there?" he asked, not looking up as he counted my change. "I'm a nature blogger. I document unexplored places. Some places stay unexplored for good reason." He finally met my eyes. "We call it the Forgotten Forest round here, not because we forgot it, because it makes you forget yourself." I smiled politely, waiting for more. "There's something wrong with the sounds in there," he continued, his voice dropping. "You don't hear things in there. You hear yourself leaving." "What does that mean?" I asked, leaning forward. He shook his head. "Means exactly what I said. The forest keeps pieces of you. Every word, every step. Takes them and saves them like a collection." He slid my receipt across the counter. "If you're smart, you'll head to Greenvale State Park. Good trails there, waterfalls, and safe." As I turned to leave, he called after me, "If you do go in, and I can tell you will, don't listen to anything but your heartbeat. The rest is just the forest trying to learn your voice." I should have heeded his warning, but all I heard was the promise of a story no one had told before. Into the silence. The entrance to Elder Hollow wasn't marked. No signs, no barriers, no paths. Just a subtle thinning of the underbrush between the road and the trees, only noticeable if you were looking for it. I parked my car at a small pull-off and checked my equipment one last time. Camera, extra batteries, water, protein bars, first aid kit, compass, map, mostly blank where the forest should be, satellite phone, though reception was spotty at best, and my audio recorder, essential for capturing ambient sounds and my narration for the blog. I set up my GoPro on my headband to film the journey and stepped into the tree line, already composing opening lines for my post, "Elder Hollow, the forest America forgot." The first thing that struck me was the density. From the outside, the forest had looked relatively open, but within 20 feet, the trees crowded together, their branches creating a canopy that allowed only dappled light to penetrate. The second thing was the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of nature. There's always sounds in living woods. Birds call, insects buzz, leaves rustle, and wind whispers. This was absence, as if sound itself was swallowed at the edges of perception. I cleared my throat, the noise startling in the stillness. "Day 1 of Elder Hollow exploration," I spoke into my recorder. "The forest is unusually quiet, almost preternaturally so. No wildlife sounds detectable yet, which is strange for early autumn." I continued deeper, using my compass to maintain a straight line. The forest grew older the further I walked. Trees expanding in girth, undergrowth thinning beneath heavy shade. Still, that unnatural silence persisted. I could hear my footsteps, my breathing, the equipment shifting in my backpack, but nothing else. Until I heard my name. "Mason!" I froze. The voice was distant, barely audible, but unmistakable. My own voice, calling from somewhere ahead. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I fumbled for my recorder, hitting playback on my recent narration. Nothing unusual, just my voice describing the forest. Just an echo, I told myself, though no environment I'd ever encountered could create an echo that preceded the sound. I shook it off and pressed forward. The trees were ancient now, their trunks wider than my arm span, bark gnarled and textured like aged skin. The ground sloped gently downward into a hollow where fog clung between the massive roots. "Why did you come here?" This time, the voice didn't sound exactly like mine. It was similar, but with a different cadence. Slower, each word more precisely formed. I whirled around, scanning the endless trees. "Is someone there? Hello?" Only silence answered. I checked my watch. 3:17 p.m. I'd been walking for nearly 2 hours. The rational part of my brain suggested making camp while there was still light. The primal part screamed to turn back, to leave this wrong-feeling place immediately. I compromised, setting up my small tent in a relatively clear area while planning to head back at first light. As I hammered in the stakes, I distinctly heard footsteps circling just beyond my visual range. "I know someone's there," I called out, trying to sound authoritative despite my racing pulse. "This isn't funny." The footsteps stopped. Then, unmistakably, a twig snapped directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Only trees and mist. I finished setting up camp with shaking hands, constantly looking over my shoulder. As dusk fell, I crawled into my tent with my recorder and camera, leaving my small lantern illuminated. "Evening update," I spoke into the recorder, keeping my voice steady. "There's definitely something unusual about the acoustics in Elder Hollow. I'm experiencing what seems like auditory hallucinations, possibly caused by the extreme silence creating sensory deprivation-like conditions. Tomorrow I'll head back to the entrance, if you can find it." I dropped the recorder. The voice had finished my sentence, but it hadn't come from outside the tent. It had come from the recorder itself. Heart pounding, I picked it up and pressed playback. The recording was normal up until "tomorrow I'll head back to." Then it cut to static. Sleep was impossible. I lay awake, listening to the silence that somehow felt heavier with each passing hour. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers just at the edge of comprehension. My voice saying things I'd never said, words I'd never even thought. "You're going deeper tomorrow. You've always belonged here. We remember your footsteps." I covered my ears, but it made no difference. The voices weren't coming from outside. They seemed to originate from inside my own head, as if my thoughts were being stolen and twisted before I could fully form them. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. When the first gray light filtered through the trees, I packed up hastily, abandoning the pretense of further exploration. All I wanted now was to leave, to put this unsettling place behind me. I checked my compass and headed in what should have been the direction of the road, but something was wrong. The terrain didn't look familiar. The slope I'd descended was nowhere to be found, and the trees, they seemed different somehow, arranged in patterns that nagged at my memory like half-forgotten faces. I walked faster and then broke into a jog, then an all-out run. The silence gave way to sounds of my panicked breathing, my feet pounding on the soft earth, and increasingly to voices that rippled around me like disturbed water. Mason Lawson, my full name in a sing-song voice I remembered from childhood. "You're always running when you're scared." My father's voice, tinged with the disappointment that had colored our relationship until his death. "You won't find a way out looking forward." This voice I recognized with a chill. Mr. Emery, my third-grade teacher who had vanished during a hiking trip when I was 9. They never found his body. I stopped, dizzy with terror and confusion, leaning against a massive oak to catch my breath. That's when I saw it. A symbol carved into the bark, a spiral with small marks around it, weathered but distinct, human-made. Looking around, I spotted another tree with a similar marking, then another. They formed a line that I hadn't noticed before, leading deeper into the woods rather than toward the exit. Against every instinct, I followed them. The voices quieted somewhat, though they never fully disappeared. They muttered just below the threshold of understanding, like radio stations bleeding into each other. The marked trees led me to a small clearing where the remains of a campsite lay in various states of decay, a tent, collapsed and partially rotted. a rusted camping stove, a backpack, its contents scattered by animals or weather, and a journal protected inside a sealed plastic bag, deliberately placed inside a hollow log. Echoes of the past. With trembling hands, I opened the bag and removed the journal. It was water-stained but largely intact, dated just 7 years ago. The name inside read Daniel Kovac. I sat on a fallen log and began to read. September 12th. Found this place through an obscure reference in my grandmother's journals. She called it the Whispering Grove and warned that it was a place where memories hung in the air like fruit, ripe and waiting. I thought it was her dementia. Now I'm not so sure. There's something wrong with the sounds here. They linger long after they should fade. I keep hearing my own voice coming back to me, but saying things I haven't said yet. We'll investigate further. September 13th. The phenomenon is getting stronger. This morning I heard myself scream before I made a sound. When I tripped on a root, I heard the impact before I fell. It's as if time is folded here, the future bleeding into the present. I've started marking trees to map the epicenter of this acoustic anomaly. September 14th. I found stone markers deep in. They look ancient, weathered symbols that resemble Norse ruins, but aren't quite right. Many have names carved beneath them, but some names are recent. I recognized one, Martin Chen, a hiker who had disappeared in this region 3 years ago. The date beneath his name was the day he was reported missing. The journal entries grew increasingly disjointed after that. Daniel described hearing voices from his past, his dead mother, an ex-girlfriend, childhood friends. He became convinced that the forest wasn't echoing sounds, but souls. September 16th. The forest feeds on memories. Every word spoken here, every noise made. It doesn't just echo them, it keeps them, stores them, and eventually it uses them. The voices I'm hearing aren't acoustic phenomena. They're what's left of the people who came before, parts of their consciousness trapped like insects in amber. September 17th. I found my own name today, carved into one of the stone markers, with tomorrow's date beneath it. I need to leave now. The forest knows I'm trying to expose it. Every step deeper has left a piece of me behind. I can feel the hollowness inside, the parts of me that are already gone. The final entry, scrawled in shaky handwriting that trailed off mid-sentence, read, September 18th. The way keeps changing. Trees move when I'm not looking. The path I walked yesterday isn't there today. The voices are screaming now. My own voice is loudest. It knows things I don't want to face, truths I've buried. Don't listen to the voices. They lie. They tell the truth. They're both. If anyone finds this, leave while your voice is still yours. I can hear my death now. It sounds like... That was it. The journal ended. Daniel Kovac had never been found, according to my research. Just another hiker gone missing in the woods. I closed the journal, my mind racing. Part of me, the rational, logical part, insisted this was elaborate fiction, a hoax, perhaps even a twisted art project. But I couldn't ignore what I'd been experiencing, the echoes that preceded sounds, the voices that knew my name, the sense of being watched not by eyes but by ears. I stood, tucking the journal into my backpack. I needed to find those stone markers, needed to understand what this place really was. The voices grew louder as I followed Daniel's tree markings deeper into the hollow. They overlapped now, a cacophony of whispers, pleas, and threats, all in different versions of my voice, some childlike, some aged, some twisted with emotions I couldn't name. You're going to die here. They'll never find your body. You already died here once. I pressed on, hands clamped over my ears, though it did nothing to mute the voices that seemed to vibrate directly through my skull. The trees opened into another clearing, larger than the first, and there they were, the stone markers. Dozens of them, arranged in concentric circles. They were rough-hewn, standing between 3 and 5 feet tall, covered in spiraling symbols that seemed to move if looked at directly. And names, so many names, with dates carved beneath them. I moved through the circle, reading them with a growing horror. Most I didn't recognize, but some I did from news reports of hikers gone missing over the decades. In the center of the circle stood the largest stone. Fresh carvings marked its surface, the exposed stone pale against the weathered sky. A name stood out, newly etched, Mason Lawson, and beneath it, today's date. Pure terror jolted through me. I stumbled backwards, away from the stone with my name, only to collide with something solid. I turned, expecting another marker. It was a person, sort of. He stood my height, with my general build, but his features were blurred, as if seen through frosted glass. When he moved, the motion left trails in the air, like a long exposure photograph, and he was speaking with my voice. You shouldn't have come here. The words emerged from where his mouth should be, but his face remained indistinct. But then, you always go where you're told not to. I backed away. What are you? What is this place? I'm you, or I will be, the part of you that stays. He tilted his head. Everyone leaves something behind. A footprint, a broken twig, a word spoken. The forest keeps these things, collects them, until there's enough to make an impression. That doesn't make any sense. My back hit another stone marker. The voices around us had quieted, as if listening. The oldest people knew. They understood that words have power, that names are more than sounds, that memories can be separated from their owners. The figure drifted closer. They buried their dead here, spoke their secrets here, let the forest remember what they wanted to forget. I glanced at my audio recorder, still running on my belt. Is this being recorded? Can I prove what's happening? The figure laughed, my laugh, but distorted, stretched too thin. Your recordings will show nothing, or worse, they'll show everything, but no one will believe you. They'll say you edited it, created it, lost your mind. It was right. In the age of deepfakes and digital manipulation, what evidence could possibly convince anyone of what I was seeing? I want to leave, I said firmly, trying to control the quaver in my voice. I don't belong here. But you do. A part of you has always been here, waiting. From your first word, your first step, the forest remembers everyone who will eventually come. The figure reached for me with indistinct fingers that seemed to blur into mist. I jerked away, breaking into a run, crashing through the stone circle and into the trees beyond. Behind me, not one, but dozens of voices called by name, each in my voice, but from different ages, different emotional states. My 6-year-old self crying, my teenage self angry, my future self hollow with regret. I ran blindly, no longer consulting my compass or looking for markers, just running, desperate to put distance between myself and the terrible circle of stones. The voices pursued me, though, growing louder and more insistent. You can't outrun yourself, Mason. Every step leaves more of you behind. We are what remains when everything else is forgotten. The forest grew denser, older and stranger. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, their bark rippling like water when I wasn't looking directly at them. The ground beneath my feet felt spongy and unreal, sometimes seeming to give away entirely before solidifying again. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time stretched and contracted unpredictably. The light filtering through the canopy never changed, locked in eternal dusk. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to buckle. Finally, I collapsed against a tree, sliding down to sit among its roots. Exhaustion overwhelmed me. The voices had faded somewhat, though they still murmured at the edges of my hearing. "Just leave me alone," I whispered, too tired even for fear. "Please." "We can't leave you alone, Mason." This voice was different, familiar, but not my own. We're all connected here. I looked up to see a man sitting on a root opposite me. Like the man before, his features were indistinct, but I could make out enough to recognize him from pictures I'd seen while researching missing hikers. "Daniel Kovac?" He nodded, the motion leaving blurred trails. "What's left of him? The forest has most of me now. How do I get out of here?" I asked, desperation edging my voice. "You don't, not completely." He gestured vaguely at the trees around us. "The forest always keeps a piece. The more you struggle, the more it takes. The longer you stay, the less of you leaves. Then I'll stop struggling. I'll give it what it wants." Daniel's blurred form seemed to shudder. "It wants everything, Mason. Your voice, your memories, your fear. It feeds on the pieces of soul that break off when we speak, when we move, when we remember." "Then what do I do?" Tears streaming down my face. "Accept the loss. Choose what to leave behind. Make the sacrifice willingly, and maybe you can keep the rest." He began to fade, his form growing more transparent with each word. I left too much, gave too much away trying to understand. "Don't make my mistake. Don't try to learn its secrets." "Wait," I called, but he was gone, dissolved back into the strange, not quite silence of the forest. I sat there, surrounded by ancient trees and the whispers of lost souls, and thought about what Daniel had said, about sacrifice, about choice. What could I give the forest that would satisfy it? What piece of myself was I willing to lose? The answer came to me slowly, rising from some intuitive part of my mind that understood the rules of this place better than my conscious thoughts. My voice, my stories, the words I used to capture places and experiences. If the forest fed on voices, on spoken words, then perhaps my silence would starve it. If it collected memories, then perhaps forgetting would deny its sustenance. I took out my recorder and camera, the tools I used to document, to remember, to share. I placed them carefully at the base of the tree along with Daniel's journal and my notes. "This is my sacrifice," I said out loud. "My last words to the forest, my stories for my freedom, my voice for my life." Something shifted in the air around me, a tension releasing, a hunger momentarily sated. The whispers receded further, though they didn't disappear entirely. I stood and began walking, no longer running, no longer searching for a way out, just walking, one deliberate step after another. No words, no panic, no fear for the forest to consume. Hours passed. The trees gradually thinned. The quality of light changed, brightening almost imperceptibly. And then, suddenly, unexpectedly, I saw the road through the trees. My car waited where I'd left it, covered in a fine layer of pollen and dew. I emerged from Elder Hollow in silence, not daring to speak, not daring to cry out in relief. The ordinary sounds of the world rushed back. Birds singing, wind in the trees, a distant car engine. They felt abrasive, too loud and too chaotic after the strange quiet of the forest. I got into my car, hands trembling as I turned the key. As I pulled onto the road, I glanced in the rear-view mirror at the tree line behind me. A figure stood at the edge of the forest, my shape, my size, but blurred and indistinct. It raised a hand in farewell or warning. I couldn't tell which. I drove away, putting miles between myself and Elder Hollow, but I couldn't escape the sensation of incompleteness that haunted me, the feeling that I'd left something essential behind. The silent return. I tried to resume my life, tried to forget Elder Hollow and its impossible horrors, but forgetting was part of the problem. I couldn't speak. Not a word would come out when I opened my mouth. Doctors found no physical cause, no damage to my vocal cords, no neurological issues that they could detect. They called it conversation disorder, a physical manifestation of psychological trauma. They recommended therapy, medication, and time. But I knew the truth. My voice was still in the forest, echoing among the ancient trees, feeding whatever hungry presence dwelled there. I'd sacrificed it willingly, and now I'd live with that choice. I abandoned my blog. What use was a travel narrator who couldn't narrate? I communicated through text messages, notepads, and email. Friends drifted away, uncomfortable with my silence and the haunted look that never quite left my eyes. At night, I still hear the whispers, my own voice speaking from the darkness, saying things I'd never said. Recounting experiences I'd never had, living a life that wasn't mine anymore. Worst of all were the recordings. When I finally gathered the courage to check my equipment, my phone, my laptop, the cloud storage where my photos and videos automatically uploaded, I found something impossible. There was only one video from Elder Hollow, one clip, 17 seconds long. It showed me walking into the trees, crossing the boundary into the forest, the same clip playing over and over, endlessly looping. I deleted it. It reappeared. I changed my password, wiped my devices, bought new equipment. Still, that same clip waited for me. Me entering the forest over and over, as if the moment of crossing was all that remained. I returned to Ravenwood once. 6 months after my experience, I didn't intend to go back into the forest. I wasn't that foolish. I just needed to understand, to find some context for what had happened to me. Harold was still working at the gas station. He recognized me immediately, his weathered face creasing with sadness. "You went in," he said, not a question. I nodded, pulled out my notepad to write. "How did you know?" "Your eyes, they're different now, seen too much, and your voice." He trailed off, looking away. "The forest took it, didn't it?" Another nod. You got off easy then. Most who go as deep as you don't come back at all, or they come back wrong. Wrong? How? I wrote. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper despite the empty store. They look the same, talk the same, but they're not the same inside. Like something hollowed them out and filled them back up with pieces that don't quite fit. A chill ran through me. I scribbled frantically. What is that place? Older than the town, older than any history we have. The original settlers called it a thin place, somewhere the veil between the worlds stretches translucent. He rubbed his gnarled hands together. My grandfather said it was a doorway that opened both ways, but I think it's more like a mirror. What you see in there is yourself, the parts you recognize and the parts you don't. I wrote one last question. Will I ever get my voice back? Harold studied me for a long moment. Maybe. The forest sometimes returns what it takes years later, when you've forgotten to miss it. But it's never quite the same. He tapped his temple. It comes back changed, speaking things you never meant to say. I left Ravenwood that day and never returned. Moved across the country, started a new life working in a library, surrounded by words but never speaking any. Some nights I still wake to the sound of my own voice, whispering from the dark corners. I'm still there. A part of me is still wandering those woods, collecting echoes, becoming memory. And sometimes in reflective surfaces, windows, mirrors, still water, I catch glimpses of a movement that doesn't match my own, a blurred figure with my outline but not my substance, watching from a world of eternal twilight and ancient trees. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again. Don't know if the piece of me trapped in Elder Hollow will ever find its way back to me. But I know this, some places aren't forgotten by accident. They're buried on purpose beneath layers of silence and lost memories. And sometimes, when you dig up what was deliberately hidden, you become part of the secret that needs keeping. Sometimes you become the warning no one will heed. Sometimes you become the echo that never fades. Thanks for listening to another of my Dark Veil Tales. If you enjoyed the story and want to hear more, be sure to click the story linked here or others in my video section. And if you're so inclined, like or subscribe to my channel. It will definitely be appreciated. Have a frightfully fantastic day.